Hello everybody, thank you so much for joining. I want to give a special thanks and a special shout out to all the people who subscribed over the last couple of hours, really days, and those who've watched the videos and shared them. So I want to especially thank those who left encouragement and suggestion for future videos. Liam, Okay Then, Cree, and Mr. Leviathan, who is such a cool name because I love Anton LaVey. Thank you guys so much. Now before we get started, make sure you hit that subscribe button and notification bell so you can get access to more material like this. Also leave your suggestions, your comments, topic suggestions, so that in future videos you'll be able to see your information represented. Now let's get started. In today's episode, we're talking about ending police brutality. We're going to take a left-hand path approach. This is an off-script session. I'm going to follow in a train of thought that I had in episode 3 of the off-script session. But before I continue, I want to give my deepest sympathies to the family of George Floyd and also send some loving support out to Christian Cooper. Now, that may not seem to be a very left-hand path sort of a thing, but as I go through this discussion, you'll understand why that is consistent with the left-hand path to show compassion and empathy on a certain level. Now, I'm not going to lay myself down or ignore facts that may surface in these two incidences, but I do want to demonstrate that there is a bit of solidarity with those men, but I do not necessarily completely and fully understand their experiences. I've had a different experience as a human being, and I feel very fortunate to have had that. So with that said, I want to get right into it. Make sure you like, subscribe, and share this video if it's something that really speaks to you and touches you and inspires you. So the point of this video is to bring a new perspective into play. There's definitely lots of race baiting out there, very angry and hurt people, but there are also very guilty and afraid people right now running around. So I want to bring a new perspective to this discussion by mitigating the excessive fear and hatred and anger and pain that is happening right now. We can do this with a left-hand path approach that requires us bringing logic, reason, apotheosis, and rational self-interest back into the discussion. This is something that has been kind of kicked out of the discussion for some centuries now, and I think it's important to bring it back in. We can all recognize these events for what they are if we are coming from a rational place of being. What we saw happen, or what we're seeing happen here, is state-sponsored murder, victim mentality, and victimization that impacts everyone, not just members of the so-called black community. And I'd say black community because most people that are melanated are not, I don't know why people think that melanated people are these colors. I don't get it. Some of us do have hyperpigmentation, but most of us are brown or some variation of that. So let's keep that straight. If you really want to keep racism alive and white guilt alive, perpetuate fear, perpetuate guilt, perpetuate division. And so it's time for us to transcend that, and I'm really grateful to the media because what they're doing is they are helping to cleanse society of its attachment to fear. Because when you're constantly being bombarded with something frightening, you lose sensitivity to it and see it beyond the emotion, which is scary on one end, but also beneficial on the other. We have to be able to look at both ends. Being able to balance these views is difficult. It requires a spirituality that is mentally mature and internally consistent. So to be able to navigate this, you have to be able to tap into rational self-interest, serenity, mental clarity, and intrinsic virtue. For more on how to cultivate this state, click on the link in the upper right-hand corner of your screen to watch a video about that. Left-hand path approaches provide the balance needed to expand self-awareness. Just like many other communities throughout the world, the erroneously called black community has been robbed of its intrinsic human approach to life by the excessive reliance on right-hand path views from Christian spirituality during enslavement. Both hands. Spiritually, there's a left-hand path and there's a right-hand path. Intellectually, there's a right-hand path and a left-hand path. And we have to be able to understand how these things work together. We have to be able to use them in an integrative way so that we can really show up in the world and create in the world from a place of power, pleasure, prosperity, purpose, and peace. It's going to be very important to help end excessive police brutality in the so-called black community and in other poor communities in the United States. They happen in poor white communities, they happen in barrios in the United States, they happen in any community where you have a group of people that is somehow socially disadvantaged and that's being policed by a group of people that do not have regard or respect for them. So this is not obviously not just a problem in the United States, it's a problem around the world. It's a human issue. So the three areas that I'll be talking about today are secular spirituality or non-theistic religion, apotheosis, and rational self-interest. These are three things that were infused into the spirituality of these people. But unfortunately for the last century, colored people, I refer to myself as colored, have let go of these powerful psychological tools. Spirituality is the ability to cultivate a self-awareness around life and to understand your intrinsic motivations, to articulate those and to fulfill those, okay? It's a sense of being able to know what you're doing in the world and how you're doing it and how you can create more of what you want. Disconnect between secular spirituality from integrated ancestral traditions leads to airy-fairy faith in the modern world. This endangers entire communities and condemns them and their members to slavery, suffering, oppression, and scarcity for generations. This will continue until these individuals are able to discover and create spiritual traditions that best suit them and their everyday lives. Non-theistic religion is something that arguably most melanated equatorial people have. They already have it. Now, when Westerners go into equatorial regions, they look and they say, oh, they have 287 gods and they have all these names for them and all these days for them. Oh, they must be theistic. No. Gods are energies, gods are characteristics, gods are personifications of qualities in life. So that means that, my ancestors that were Cometian would personify darkness and mystery through the god Set. So they would basically use different terms to describe processes in life and personify them so it was easier to grasp and psychologically understand them. So for a Westerner who came from a Judeo-Christian influenced culture, when they see that we had, 50 gods, 1,000 gods, 1,000,000 gods, a god for every day, like in India and places like that, they would say, oh, these are polytheistic people, pantheistic people. No, they were quite possibly non-theistic. It's just that the Western lens caused the personification, the advanced symbology of godhood to be mistaken as literal fact. I've read a story about a Western observer of the Dogon in West Africa, in Mali. I'm part Malian, and he was observing how they would go into the witch doctor, right? A wonderful word, right? They go into the hut of the witch doctor, and the witch doctor would have like the innards of some sort of animal, and they were going for healing, and the witch doctor would use the innards and poke around and do this whole psychodrama of removing a demon or removing a disease. The people who went into the hut knew that these were the innards of animals. They knew it was a drama. They knew it was a game. They knew it wasn't real. But they played along with it, which is what really interested this person who I was reading from. It was a book by a physician who was studying psychosomatic illness as well as placebo effect, nocebo effect, confirmation bias, that sort of stuff. The power of perception in human experience. And so it's really interesting that our perspectives of that have changed. Now, for the last 150, we'll say 100 years, because I don't think my ancestors 150 years ago believed in Jesus. I just think that they were like, yeah, okay, Jesus, great, don't kill us. But we'll say a century ago, when people started to really believe in Jesus, and this is actually documented when In God We Trust was put on our currency. When people started to actually believe in a God in the sky, they started to outsource their ability to take charge of their own lives. And I think that if you are in a community that has a foreign police force, and it is your native community, it is the community in which you were born, and it has a foreign spiritual tradition that is belittling, then your likelihood, your ability to create a solution and come up with something to your rational self-interest is going to be very low. It's not going to be likely that you're going to create a solution that's going to improve your odds of living a harmonious, productive, prosperous life. And this is what's happened almost generation after generation after generation in the so-called Black community. But before that, if you look back and read the writings of Zora Neale Hurston, there was still hoodoo, especially in places like Louisiana, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, Mississippi. They still practice hoodoo from Florida, which was a fusion of African spirituality, Paleo-American or Indigenous American spirituality, and Catholicism and some of the Christian traditions. Our ancestors still use that kind of spirituality. And people say, well, racism has not gotten worse since that time. 100 years ago, racism was really bad. Yeah, it was bad, but if you talk to people, read the stories of people and experiences of people during that time period, there was a certain self-awareness that existed, especially among people who were still connected to their indigenous religion. There was a certain sense of self-awareness, and so when challenges did get placed upon the community, like attacks from the Klan or something like that, the community could come together, and they could work things out in a way that allowed them to keep going. Now, those were very hard times. I wouldn't compare today to then, because today I would say is comparatively better in many ways, but the ability to understand that God wasn't out there, but that God was in here, and that God was something that you could cultivate, not something that you must venerate, I think was a big part of the culture prior to current times. So the idea that you are God and you are cultivating God in your own experience is something that I think has been lost, but it's something that can come back. And if people in these communities can recognize the challenges as a projection, I think that they can more effectively come up with solutions. If we're going to address excessive police brutality in communities of color, we have to first look at the perspective and how communities of color are showing up and what impediments they currently have intrinsically that allow these sorts of egregious events, these tragic events, to continue to happen. All of this might seem like a major challenge, but things are changing. Recent events and global awareness are creating space for lasting solutions. This is the time to take the wheel and start applying left-hand path approaches. These approaches can elevate social standing by bringing spiritual balance, reinforcing rational self-interest, and expanding human expression in these communities. This enriches communities devastated by invasive and toxic right-hand path views. We are rebuilding civilization as we collectively transcend old traumas and forgive millennia-old vendettas. Quicker than expected, we are becoming one advanced race again. Having a left-hand path perspective enriches spiritual, mental, emotional, and social health while building self-awareness in the next generation. This is especially needed in communities that have been stripped of their intrinsic human response because of the overemphasis on right-hand path Christianity. This video is for the next generation of humans who are ready to resurrect civilization and create a world that actually works. Some of the greatest challenges to our self-awareness come from self-criticism, self-doubt, and guilt. And these are the pillars of right-hand spirituality. Right-hand spiritualities teach us that we are minuscule, we're tiny, we're small, and there's something greater than us that we have to prove ourselves to. Maybe you sense that there's an exceptional power within you that is creating your reality, that is driving your reality, that you want to awaken. If you're ready to take the inspiration of these videos to the next level and activate that exceptional power within you, I have set aside some time for us to connect. Click the Calendly link in the description below so that we can set up a time to talk. If we're a good fit, I would love to support you on your journey. If this video resonates with you and you enjoyed it, make sure you check out these videos right here. Also, leave comments in the section below for suggestions for videos in the future. If you're new to the left-hand path and this is something that is inspiring you, it's really empowering for you, but you also don't want to leave and let go of the right-hand path, things that you found useful, just put a suggestion for the topic below. I've had some wonderful suggestions, some wonderful comments so far, and I am in the works on those videos, so maybe you can be one of the people that suggested the videos. I will give you a shout out when I see your comment in the section below. Thank you so much for watching this video. I can't wait to connect with you and see you on the next side. Have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your day.